All right, in today's lesson, we're going to get more into how the government actually works. In the previous lessons, we've talked about some goals and principles our founding fathers had for our government. We've talked about some of the influences they had with the republics and from the Enlightenment. But today, we're going to get a little bit more into actually how the government works. Okay, Article 1 of the Constitution deals with the legislative branch. The legislative branch, all right? And it has two houses in the legislative branch, and both of these houses together make up Congress. Congress, okay? The two houses our two branches are the House of Representatives, right here, House of Representatives, and the Senate, which we'll get to in just a second. My students get confused on this quite often. So here's an analogy. Think of a Reese's peanut butter cup, all right? You have chocolate and you have peanut butter. Two different ingredients. But together, they make up a Reese's peanut butter cup. The House of Representatives and the Senate together make up Congress. Okay? So, when I ask you what Congress is, think of Reese's peanut butter cups. Two different ingredients. You have the House of Representatives and you have the Senate. Those together make up Congress. Okay, let's talk about one of the houses, and that's the House of Representatives. And if you remember, House of Representatives is based on population. Currently, we have 435 members in the House of Representatives. Remember, Nebraska being a relatively small populated state, we have 3 members to represent the state of Nebraska. 3. California has 53. California is the largest populated state in the nation, and because of the population, they get a whole lot more people than us. Now, every state has at least one rep. Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, Alaska, who am I forgetting? They have one House of Representative member because their population is even smaller than ours. Okay? But everybody has at least one. Nebraska, I'll put that right here. Nebraska gets 3. Okay? Now, these guys have a 2-year term. That means that they are elected every 2 years. Every 2 years, members of the House of Representatives are up for re-election. Okay? Now, here's the requirements. You must be at least 25 years old. And you've had to have been a citizen of the United States for 7 years. Okay? 25 years old and have to be, you must be a resident of the state you live in. Representing, by the way. So you must be a resident of the state. You must be 25 years old. And you've had to have been a citizen of the United States for at least 7 years. Now, their job is to propose tax laws. Tax laws, believe it or not, falls exclusively to the House of Representatives. House of Representatives, not the Senate, not the peanut butter of the Reese's peanut butter cup, but to the chocolate. The House of Representatives proposes tax laws. Now, the other power that the House of Representatives has solely is that they can impeach the president. Impeach. Now, impeach the president means they can basically have charges brought up against the president. That's what an impeach means. Charges have been brought up against the president. Okay? Impeaching, and the Constitution says the president has to be thought to have committed at least high crimes and misdemeanors. High crimes and misdemeanors. Okay? So that's what the legislative branch, House of Representatives part of the legislative branch does. All right. Here's the other half of the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup, which is Congress. Remember, Reese's Peanut Butter Cup equals Congress. Okay, so you had the House of Representatives is part of it, and the other part is the Senate. The Senate. Each state, no matter how big, no matter how small, gets 2 senators. Therefore, since there's 50 states in the Union, we have 100 members in the Senate. All right? The Senate term, to get to be a senator, is a little bit better. First of all, there's only 100 of you versus 435. Plus, you get a 6-year term. 6-year term. Okay? And how this works is a third every 2 years. Every 2 years, 1/3 of the Senate is up for re-election. Okay? And I will explain this in class. I'll actually draw this on the board because I know this can be a little bit confusing. But a third of the members are up every 2 years. And the reason for that is they don't want... now think about this. House of Representatives, they have to run for re-election, all 435 every 2 years. What if the Senate had only a 2-year term? Can you imagine what would happen, conceivably, if every member of Congress, every member of the House of Representatives, and every member of the Senate was thrown out? That would be a little difficult. You wouldn't have people there with any experience. Nobody knew where the files were kept. Nobody knew who was on a committee. So the Senate is up for re-election, 1/3 of them, every 2 years. Okay? And they get a 6-year term. So they're up for re-election every 6 years. So once you're elected to the Senate, you're good for 6 years. Now, you must be at least 30 years old. You must be a resident of the state that you're representing. And you've had to have been a citizen for at least 9 years. So you see the requirements for Senate is a little more stringent. Remember, the House of Representatives, you only had to be 25, and you had to be a citizen for 7 years. Well, the Senate, because it's a longer term, and there's fewer of them, 30 years old and 9-year term. Now, it used to be, by the way, until the 17th Amendment, members of the Senate were actually appointed by state legislatures or elected by the state legislature. 17th Amendment changed that. Now we, the people, vote for our House of Representatives and our Senate. All right? Interesting little fact there. Now, the Senate has some unique jobs that only the Senate alone has. They approve presidential appointments. This is one of the checks on the executive branch. The Senate has to approve. The president nominates, but the Senate has to approve. So you might need a new Secretary of Defense, say. The president goes, I'm going to nominate Bill to be the Secretary of Defense. Well, he nominates him, but the Senate has to approve it. And if the Senate doesn't approve it, then he does not get to be the Secretary of Defense. So that's a check. Same thing here. It ratifies treaties with foreign governments. The president makes treaties with foreign governments and works out a deal and goes, yeah, I think we should increase our trade, or we're going to promise to protect you in time of a war. Okay, good deal. I agree. But then it has to go to the Senate, and the Senate has to ratify the treaty with the foreign government. If they don't ratify it, the treaty does not happen. And finally, the Senate can try the president after being impeached. If you remember, the House of Representatives brings charges against the president, which is called impeachment. If the president is impeached, the trial happens in the Senate. Trial happens in the Senate. And by the way, 2 presidents have been impeached, Andrew Johnson and Bill Clinton. But guess what? They were never removed from office because in the trial, in the Senate, they were found not guilty. All right? So if they're found not guilty, president remains in office and business goes on as usual. All right? So that's the Senate. Remember, both the Senate and the House of Representatives together make up Congress. Kind of got a little ahead of myself on that one. So let's talk about what they both do together. Both together equals Congress. Okay? Remember? Peanut butter cup. All right. Both of them together propose laws. Remember, a bill has to be agreed on by both the House and the Senate. Both of them together declare war. That's right. The president doesn't declare war. The president can ask for a declaration of war, but Congress has to give it to him. All right? They both together can override a presidential veto. if a law makes it to the president's desk and the president doesn't like it, the president can veto it. Doesn't mean the bill is necessarily dead. It then is brought back to Congress, and if 2/3 of them, which, remember, if there's 435 House of Representative members plus 100 senators, that's 535. So 2/3 of them, which is 66.66666% of them, which is like, 350 something, 352, I think. If 350 or so of them vote to say, no, we really do want this bill, we want this to be a law, they can override the president's veto and it becomes a law. And finally, both together can propose amendments. And amendments means changes to the Constitution with, again, a 2/3 vote. All right, so 66.66%. All right, can propose a change to the Constitution. All right, so that's what they both do together. Article 2 of the Constitution talks about the executive branch. The executive branch is the president, the vice president, and the cabinet. The president and the vice president and the cabinet make up the executive branch. And the cabinet are the secretaries. There's 15 men and women who make sure that the laws are carried out. Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Treasury, Secretary of Homeland Security, Veterans Affairs, Education, Housing and Urban Development. Who am I forgetting? Transportation, Commerce. Well, anyways, there's 15 of them. All right? Now, when a law is passed, it gets filed or funneled to one of these 15 members of the cabinet. Okay? One of these 15 members to make sure that law is enforced. So every law our Congress makes and the president signs into law is categorized into one of 15 different slots, and those people make sure that the law is carried out. All right? Now, let's talk about the president. The president, being the chief executive, has a 4-year term. 4-year term. That means he needs to run for re-election after 4 years. Now, up until I think it was the which amendment was it? Oh my gosh, I should know this one. Hang on. All right, I'm back. It is the 22nd Amendment. That's what I thought. All right. Up until 1951, believe it or not, there was no term limit on the president. It was just a tradition that a president would serve 2 terms and then leave. George Washington set that precedent when he was the very first president. He was elected for his first term for 4 years, ran for re-election, so his second term, and he said, something, I'm stepping away. I think that 2 terms is enough for any man. And everybody followed this unwritten tradition all the way until Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He served 4 terms. 4 terms. All right? A lot of people think he was a great president. He was a wartime president. He was the president during World War II. Also brought us out of the Great Depression. So he served 4 terms. But, he died in 1945, April of 1945. In 1951, they made a change or amended the Constitution to take that unwritten tradition of 2 terms and make it a law, an amendment to the Constitution. So, right now, a president can serve 2 terms. Okay? All right. Now, the president has even stricter requirements than either the House of Representatives or the Senate. The President of the United States must be at least 35 years old. He must be a natural-born citizen. He must be born in the United States. Okay? And he's had to live in the United States for at least 14 years. Okay? So you may have been born in the United States, you lived there for 10 years, then your parents moved to England. All right? Well, when you move back to the United States, you're still a citizen of the United States. You've had to serve or be a resident for at least 14 years before you could then run for office. All right? So, popular people that could not be president would be somebody like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnold Schwarzenegger used to be the governor of California, very popular, or at least he was. He had some problems toward the end of his term and then after his term. But Arnold Schwarzenegger, because he was born in Austria, could never be the president of the United States. So I'm trying to think of some others. Nothing coming to the top of my mind right now. But anyways, so he must be born in the United States. Now, the president approves or vetoes laws. Remember, the legislative branch, Congress, which is the House of Representatives and the Senate, make the laws. They make it up to the president's desk. The president must then either approve the law or veto the law. Now, he can also, little known fact, he can also do nothing, and then the law would just go into effect without his signature. But anyways, all right. So approve or veto the law. And you remember from our last section, if the president does veto the law, it would then go back to Congress, where they would need a 66.66% vote to override the veto. Okay, so that's the president so far. Some of the other jobs that the president does, he makes treaties with foreign nations. All right, he is the chief representative of the United States. So when he flies overseas in Air Force One, which is a beautiful aircraft, 747, I mean, he's representing the United States of America. All right, so he's responsible for making treaties with foreign nations. He nominates judges for the Supreme Court. Probably one of the most important jobs a president has. Most important. I'm going to get ahead of myself for just a second, because guess what? Judges to the Supreme Court and to the federal court are there for life. They're for life. And especially judges to the Supreme Court, they are going to make rulings that are going to impact our nation for decades possibly. So, remember, he nominates who has to approve it? The Senate. So you'll see quite a few contentious times. When a president nominates somebody to the Supreme Court, they take that very, very seriously, because if that person is put onto the Supreme Court, they're there for a long time. Could be 10, 20, 30, possibly even 40 or more years. All right? So he nominates judges to the Supreme Court. Very important job. He also appoints cabinet members. Remember the 15 members of his cabinet that make up part of the executive branch. And finally, probably one of his most important duties, Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. military forces. He is the head of the military. Remember, he's a civilian. If you remember from earlier lessons, we talked about that our founding fathers wanted to make sure that a civilian was in charge of our military. So the president, being a civilian, is the commander-in-chief of U.S. military forces. All right. Article 3 deals with the judicial branch. All right. Which is the Supreme Court and the federal courts. And their job is to interpret the laws. Okay? It is a life term. Wow. Now, why would it... Many of my students say, well, why? Why a life term? Why would they, get to stay there for life? Well, here's the reason. We want to make sure that the people there that are on the Supreme Court and the federal court system are not going to be influenced by politics or by voters. Okay? Their sole job is to make sure that any law that's proposed is fair, it's balanced, and it is constitutional. They don't have to worry about politics. They don't have to worry about if this ruling is politically beneficial to them. They don't have to worry about that. Their job is safe. All you have to do is to make sure that the law is constitutional and it's interpreted fairly. All right? So part of their job is to make sure the laws are constitutional. If they are not, they need to declare them unconstitutional and they'll be thrown out. They also settle disputes involving the United States. So if, somebody sues the federal government, they would get involved and they would rule either in favor of the United States or not. Okay, they're impartial. They're representing not only the United States but the people. And there have been times, several times, that they've ruled against the United States. Okay, they also settled disputes between states. Remember, under the Articles of Confederation, there was no way for anybody to decide which state was right. And again, I have to use my water example. If South Dakota dammed up the Missouri River, we wouldn't get a drop from the Missouri River. We would take South Dakota to court, and obviously the courts would say, hey, South Dakota, you cannot build a dam, and deny Nebraska water from the Missouri River. All right, so they settled disputes between states. And finally, the Chief Justice, by the way, Supreme Court, there are 9 members. 9 members. All right, 9 members on the Supreme Court. The Chief Justice presides over impeachment trial of the president. If you remember, if the president is impeached, that means he has had charges brought against him by the House of Representatives. It then goes to trial in the Senate. All right? The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court presides over the impeachment in the Senate. By the way, in the Senate, it's just a simple majority. If the majority of the senators vote for impeachment or removal, then the president is gone. Okay? Again, it's never happened. We've had 2 trials, but both times the president was found not guilty. All right. Let's get down to it. Let's elect the president. All right. Electing the president. Again, I kind of got ahead of myself earlier. I should have waited, but hey, whatever. Get to hear it twice. The president is elected to a 4-year term. We've talked about that. And as a result of the 22nd Amendment, a person may be elected to 2 terms. All right? No more than 2. But it's a different election process. Okay? It's the Electoral College. Electoral College. So Americans actually do not directly vote for the president, believe it or not. I mean, you go to the polls and you'll see their names on there, and you do vote, but here's what you're really voting for. Okay? You're voting for a group of electors who have been pledged to the candidate. Okay? And the number of electors are determined by the number of senators and House of Representative members the state has. So Nebraska has 3 House of Representative members and 2 senators, because every state has 2. So Nebraska gets 5 votes for president at the Electoral College. 5 votes. California have 53 House of Representative members and 2 senators. So California gets 55 votes for president. All right? So you're going to see a lot of times money, presidential campaign money, go into states that have a large number of these big votes. California, Texas, Florida, Michigan, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois. You're not going to see a whole lot of presidential campaign funds flowing into Wyoming, unfortunately. Because Wyoming, because they have 1 House of Representative and 2 senators, only gets 3 votes. All right? So, I know it's a little strange. So, a few weeks after the election, the Electoral College actually meets and votes. And we've kind of already figured out, honestly, by that time, it's almost a formality. Because we know that whoever wins the popular election, in each state, the candidates have already promised who they're going to vote for, so we kind of already know. Now, in a majority of the nation, the candidate who receives the majority of the popular vote, what did I do? Majority of the popular vote receives all the electoral votes for the state, except for Maine and our wonderful state of Nebraska. That's right. Nebraska and Maine split their electoral votes. Okay, theirs are based on the congressional districts. Remember, Nebraska has 3 congressional districts. So if a presidential candidate wins the 2nd and 3rd, they're going to get that vote. But if they win, the other candidate wins the first congressional district, they would get a vote. And then whoever wins the overall popular vote gets the other 2 votes. So believe it or not, Nebraska and Maine are the only 2 states it's not a winner takes all. All right? Now, the candidate who receives the majority of the electoral votes wins. Now, there are, believe it or not, 538. What? I thought it was supposed to be 535. 435 in the House of Representatives, 100 in the Senate. So that'd be 535. Why 538? Well, here's the outlier. Washington, D.C., the people of Washington, D.C., because it's not a state, get the same thing as the minimum of a state. So remember, Wyoming, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Alaska, they have 1 House of Representatives and 2 senators, so they get 3 votes. They decide that they're going to give Washington, D.C., the people there should be allowed to be represented in the Electoral College, 3 votes. Therefore, it becomes 538. So whoever receives the majority, simple majority, of the electoral votes wins the presidency. Okay, so that's how the Electoral College works. But some things have kind of gone haywire. Due to that winner-take-all process in 48 of the 50 states, a candidate can win the popular vote and still lose the presidency. This has happened 4 times. The last being Bush-Gore. Al Gore actually won the majority of the popular vote, but he did not win a majority of the Electoral College. Okay, so there are people out there who said, we should get rid of this system and just go to a straight popular vote for presidency. I don't see a real push for this. We'd have to change the Constitution, a constitutional amendment, and others would argue, hey, this has worked. This system has worked well for over 200 years. Why rock the boat? So there you have it. That's how our federal government works. Congress, which is made up of both the House of Representatives and the Senate, make the laws. The executive branch, which is the president, vice president, the cabinet, enforce the laws. And the judicial branch make sure that laws are interpreted fairly. We've also talked about that Electoral College, how we elect the president, which is a lot different than the way we elect other members to the federal government. All right? So hopefully you understand this. If not, start over. Look at it again, listen to it again, and you will have it all down and ready for the big test. All right, good job, guys.